Welcome to PRI's podcast. I'm your host, Rowena Ichon. Our guest in this podcast is Damon Dunn, a true American success story and a rising star in the conservative movement. Damon rose out of poverty to attend Stanford University, play in the National Football League, and now he's a successful real estate developer here in California. He also ran for office, California Secretary of State and Mayor of Long Beach. We're also proud that Damon Dunn will be a regular contributor to PRI's Right by the Bay blog with his column Free Markets 101. Tim and I are PRI's Director of Communications, and I chatted with Damon about growing up on a farm in Texas, the experiences and the people that shaped his views, and his goals for reaching out to middle and working class Americans. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to PRI's podcast, Damon. We're so pleased at PRI that you're joining our Right by the Bay blog as a regular contributor. You'll be writing a new column that we're calling Free Markets 101. Can you talk about your new column and what you hope the readers will take away from it?
Yeah, sure. And thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to begin this dialogue with you guys, but hopefully to a broad audience of listeners. You know, my thoughts on starting this column is that I think we need to have policy be more relatable, particularly to middle class and working class Americans, because when you're not empowered, to influence change, power through whether you have a lot of resources, so it makes sense to go and lobby certain politicians, whether it's on the state level or on the federal level, or even on the city council level, then you're more engaged to that policy and how it impacts your business or how it impacts your life. And I think people who are upper middle class to upper class, they recognize they have that authority with their dollar to be able to get politicians to come to them. But middle class and working class Americans don't have that dollar to go and help shape or go lobby policy. And so we have to do it in other ways. And so I think throughout this podcast over time, making policy more relatable to middle class, working class Americans, but then also hopefully being able to empower them to understand how they can influence change.
Damon, for our listeners who may not be familiar with you, it's probably the understatement of the year to say that you overcame quite a bit in your childhood to be the great success that you are today. Can you share a little bit about your personal story and how the adversity you've faced in your upbringing shapes who you are and what you do today?
I had a tough go at it as a kid. My mom had me at 16, and my father was killed when I was 3, and I was pretty much raised by my grandparents on a small farm in Mansfield, Texas, which is a small town. This has grown a lot since 1976, but I got up every morning slopping hogs, feeding cows, goats, chickens, 5 a.m., 5 p.m. after school, and we were incredibly poor. I lived in this trailer, and I slept in one bed with 2 uncles for the first 12 years of my life, and we literally didn't even have hot water. We had to boil water on the stove and then pour it into the bathtub with cold water, and then we took turns taking baths. And my school lunch was regularly mayonnaise sandwiches or cheese sandwiches or syrup sandwiches. So I grew up really poor, but then I had the opportunity, I took the opportunity to be a really good student and to cultivate my talents as an athlete, as a football player, which led to the opportunity of going to Stanford University. Left Stanford, played in the NFL for Dallas, Jacksonville, Cleveland, and New York Jets. Left there and started a real estate development firm, had some success, and now I find myself wanting to give back to other people. And so when you ask the question, how has it shaped me today? And I would say primarily it's given me a heart to want to give back. Well, let me share this story. There was a story about an eagle that lost an egg, and it was found by a chicken. And this chicken nurtured this egg. And inside that egg was an eagle. It had eagle potential. It had eagle chromosomes. It had eagle history. But because it was born in a chicken pen, this baby eagle came out, and it really just acted like a chicken and entertained chicken ambitions and playing chicken games. Its greatest ambition was to sit on the chicken post and yell cock-a-doodle-doo. But then it saw an adult eagle in the sky one day flying with such grace and majesty, and it started to feel something swell up on the inside of it for the first time, and it began to flap its wings and began to fly. And that adult eagle had swooped down and said, hey, listen, you're not a chicken, you're an eagle. And I find myself wanting to be that adult eagle, to go down into the communities where there are other people who have eagle chromosome and eagle potential and help them reach their potential. There are a lot of young kids who are in middle class or working class American families, living in poverty, that have the same academic acumen and the same potential that I have, but they never have that eagle to come back and tell them that they're not chickens, that they are truly eagles, that they can soar and they can fly. So for me, my background where I've been, what I've lived through, and what God's blessed me to be able to achieve, I allow that to empower me to go back and empower other people.
That's a great story, Damon. You know, you had also a great college football career at Stanford and then went on to play in the NFL. You were recruited by the late Bill Walsh and played under the great coach Tyrone Willingham. What was it like being mentored by these two Eagles, these two legendary figures, and what did you learn from them?
You know, both men had different perspectives on leadership. Bill Walsh would say, you are a leader if you go for a walk and people are following you, then you're a leader. But if you go for a walk and nobody's following you, then you're just walking. And so his perspective of leadership was, you are what you are. You go and you put 53 guys or 80 guys in a locker room, and the guys who understand how to socially and how to athletically perform and how to guide and instruct their teammates, their leadership is going to rise to the top. It's a natural selector. You're not selected because someone told you this, or you get some job and you're paid X, Y, Z, or you get some title. His definition of leadership really was put a group of men together and watch who rises to the top, whose ideas typically get implemented, who are the ones that the guys typically listen to, who are the guys that they look at to get instruction from, who are the guys that calm things during controversy in a game. So he was pretty much, leadership is what it is, and you'll be exposed in the middle of a room full of men. And I really appreciated learning that, because a lot of people try to teach it through, how much money or what your possessions are or what your socioeconomic status is. But I really appreciated that from Bill Walsh. He was a true savant. Coach Willingham, I think learning from him, he was a man that cared about growing young boys and young men into men. He cared about that probably more than winning. I would say 60-40. He understood the unique opportunity he had to be able to influence and shape young guys who were trying to figure out who we were, where we fit into this world, our self-esteem, what kind of relationships we want to be, and ultimately what kind of men we want to be. And he was very engaged in saying, your character will outlast this game. You're going to play some games. You may be lucky enough to win some trophies, and some of you may go on to win and earn large NFL contracts. But at the end of the day, all the money and all the games played with all the adulation of all the fans and all the cheering, that stuff's going to be gone. And what's going to be left is a man. And hopefully that man has character, and that you've leveraged this process of playing sports to become a better man. And Coach Willingham, he really taught me the importance of being a good man, and the importance of mentoring other young men into being good men. So those were the experiences I took most from Bill Walsh and Ty Willingham.
Damon, in your first column, which our readers can read right now on PRI's website at pacificresearch.org, you make the case for what you call the conservative view of wealth creation, distinguishing between those on the left who see most wealth and wealth creation as evil, and what are legitimate and important forms of wealth creation. Describe what you mean and talk a little bit about how wealth creation can really help provide more opportunities and lift people out of poverty.
The American dream is the greatest brand in world history. I mean, think about it. Everyone around the world, they see this nation that has freedom, that has liberty, that respects property rights. And people want to be here. They don't want to come here for our entitlements. They want to come here for opportunity, the opportunity to start where you are, to use what you have, to do what you can until you can get a piece of that American dream. You can have a father from Kenya and a mother from Kansas, and you can be president. There are a lot of other countries around this world that can't happen. But in America it can, because our founders decided that, we want everyone to be created equal, and they have equal access to liberty and to live in a life of happiness. Now, as a conservative, I look at wealth creation as a positive. And when you are able to leverage the resources in this country, whether you are Mark Zuckerberg and you drop out of Harvard to go start this social networking company online, and you create Facebook, and now it's an $80 billion company. He took his own initiative. He went to recruit donors and venture capitalists, and eventually got to structured conventional capital, and he created wealth. I don't look at the wealth that he created as evil. And I think oftentimes from the left, the top 1% of earners are always railed against, and they're always looked at as a negative. And I think that people that have used their own resources, their mind, their skills, and their networks to leverage that to be able to create a business opportunity, no matter if you make $50,000 a year or $50 billion a year, to me, that's legitimate wealth creation. And I get disappointed when I hear people group all of the top 1% or any percentage of people together, because all of those people didn't get there through a means of cheating or stepping on the back of little people or forgetting about people behind them, but some people actually do give back. I do think, however, where I do align with people that are on the left, some of my friends, a lot of my friends are liberals. I do think that there are opportunities for the wealthy to collude with government, right? And when you collude with government to be able to have a redistribution of resources, to me, I don't think that that's appropriate wealth creation. You know, you see that when we went through the bailout, we had the Great Recession and we came with the TARP, Troubled Assets Program, and then we had the bailout. We had the stimulation program where we had, I think, another $800 billion for infrastructure projects. Well, if you're wealthy and you make bad decisions by running an investment bank, you ought to have to pay the consequences of your bad decisions. But when the government steps in and says, you know what, we're going to erase your bad decisions so that, quote unquote, the entire market doesn't crash. I know that was the fear. And then you allow these CEOs to get, their $25 million, windfall payments throughout the year. To me, that's not fair. You've redistributed wealth. The taxpayers are covering your losses from the bad decisions that you're making, and the CEOs and the chairman of the board and the board of directors and shareholders are walking away making profits that they shouldn't have been able to make. To me, that's not fair. And I think that that's the differentiation and the delineation that I wanted to make, is that some wealth is incredibly fair and we ought to celebrate it. And if you plant your entrepreneurial flag and you grow your business into something successful and you're lucky enough to be in the top 1%, I ought to praise you and celebrate you. But when someone does that and you try to detract or you try to make their wealth creation look negative, I certainly don't support that opinion. But I do think at times the wealthy can collude with government to create opportunities for themselves and distribute wealth to them on the taxpayers' backs. And that, I think, is unfair, and I don't agree with.
Damon, poverty is a big area for PRI in 2018, and perhaps many Americans outside of California don't think of California as a high poverty state, but it actually is. We just released a new issue brief called Good Intentions, which evaluates California's government anti-poverty programs and profiles private charities that are doing a better job helping people in need. Having grown up in poverty, what's your view? Is government doing a good job fighting poverty? Are faith-based organizations, nonprofits, and private charities, is there a role for them, and are they doing a better job?
And let me start by saying you have to start, what's the motive of the policy? Is the motive of the policy to make someone feel comfortable, and just to be a safety net? Far often we've used that safety net as a mattress. People lay on it and don't have any intentions of having movement or upward progress. Is that your motive, to provide comfort? Or is the motive, when we say anti-poverty, to give people an opportunity to have vertical movement and progress in their career and up and out of poverty? And let me give you, there are good examples of where government has used resources to be a good anti-poverty program, which would stimulate upward mobility. Think about the GI Bill. We had all of our World War II veterans returning home, and we passed the GI Bill, which gave them access to education, access to vocational training, access to low-cost loans to go to school, but also access to low-cost loans to start businesses. Now you're giving someone a tool that's allowing them to move vertically. If you get an education, or if you get a vocation, or if you're able to start up your own business, I've given you a tool now, right? So that's not a handout. That's saying that I'm going to teach you how to fish. When you teach someone how to fish, you feed them for life. But far too often, in more significant rations of policy, the government on a local level, on a state level, on a federal level, have been more effective at just handing out goodies and allowing people to use the safety net as a mattress. And it really isn't anti-poverty. It's much more, I'm going to make you comfortable in your poverty without any expectation that you would leverage these resources that the taxpayers are giving you to be able to have upward mobility. That I don't agree with. I do agree with teaching people how to fish, not just giving them fish. So when policy is used to do that, I certainly support that. You also see programs where there's, think about today's economy. Anytime there's a shift in the economy, right? Go back to World War II, we're shifting from ag into the great industrialization. And then we had people who had the opportunity to go be retrained and get, middle income jobs that had benefits. And I think that's where the American dream starts for people. Nowadays, we're shifting from, more of the industrial manufacturing economy to a more of a technology, information services, automation, artificial intelligence type of economy. And we have a lot of people who are stuck in what I would say the Rust Belt, your Pennsylvanias, your Ohios, your Wisconsins, your Michigans, who have lost jobs that have been displaced because we've, have such aggressive policies against coal, et cetera. And they need to be retrained. And we need to start thinking about what type of GI Bill we can work with people to give them tools to learn how to fish and not just give them fish.
As we know, the free market can play perhaps the most important role in alleviating poverty by bringing private investments and jobs to poor communities. But these efforts are often hindered by poor government policy. So what's your view? What kind of job is government doing in bringing jobs and opportunity where they're needed the most?
I think they're doing a poor job. If you look at even our federal budget, I mean, a significant portion of our budget, probably 70%, is going towards our entitlement programs, the four major entitlements: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and now the Affordable Care Act that was passed. And so to me, again, those are not government distribution of resources that allow people to have upward mobility. This is an insignificant and unbalanced portion of the total taxpayer dollars coming in to make people more comfortable where they are and not to give them an opportunity to reach the American dream. So I think government has not done historically a good job. Think about it. I mean, in layman's terms, I've seen presidents come and go, and the same people that were poor when President Obama was in office, they were poor when he left office. I could say the same thing about Bill Clinton or George W. Bush. At the end of the day, you have to have policies that allow people to be able to move upward and to be able to create value. Let me just give you two examples, because it's so easy at times to make these claims but not support it with practical policies. In Los Angeles, they started to rezone buildings downtown that were zoned as office buildings, and they rezoned them to residential. The benefit of that is that if someone wants to create downtown living space and you create more population downtown, then the businesses downtown, your bars, your restaurants, your service businesses, you're going to create more businesses to service the residential that's living down there. Not only that, but by downzoning that from an office to a residential building, a developer can now come in and not have to put in all the infrastructure to, take down a vacant lot and to build the parking garage underground, to be able to build all the vertical improvements and all the work that goes with that. There's probably $100+ million of work that goes into that, versus when a building's already built and has been rezoned from office to residential, you can go in with all those vertical improvements and ground improvements already in place, and then you can retrofit that building at a lower cost into a residential building. And now that creates a tremendous amount of value for the city, creating more tax dollars downtown as people move downtown and as more businesses are opening downtown. It also creates a better opportunity for the business community, because now they can transact this development with lower cost and have a better return. So smart policies that create value like that are the kind of policies that I think that we should migrate towards, and it really help people move the needle for vertical mobility in our economy.
Turning to education, education is another important issue for you, and one that we know you'll be writing about in your column. You've written that America's education system must evolve to keep pace with the changing global economy. In your view, what one or two things need to change in American education to better prepare our students to compete globally?
So I think there are two things that we have to evolve, grow, and change. I mean, I think it's a combination of all that: evolution, growth, and change. And the two things and I think there are other areas, but I think if I'm going to focus on two, technology in the classroom is significant. I was running for mayor of Long Beach, and there was a high school there, Wilson High School. The principal, her name was Sandy Blazer, and she had an idea, and they only had an old dilapidated computer lab for their students, so she couldn't execute this on the level she wanted. But think about this. She wanted to say, you know what, let's put the kids on a block schedule. So they're going to go math 3 days a week, and we'll do 45, and they'll do 90-minute classes, and they'll have 45 minutes where the teacher can teach from the front, and then 45 minutes where they can work on a computer to go over the day's lesson plan and see how they learn. The reason she wanted to do this is because she's averaging 35 students in a classroom and one teacher. The teacher asks questions, and maybe 5 kids answer all the questions. You don't understand how the other 34 kids or how the other 31 kids in the class are actually learning. And the teacher can't hand out manual quizzes every day to be able to assess that, grade it, and then create interventions. But if they had a computer lab in every class where they were doing math and science, then you would have the opportunity to teach on, let's say, linear regressions, and then do a 30-minute lesson on linear regressions, with the first section of questions being easier, moving to more difficulty. And you'll see who actually mastered the lesson today and who didn't. And then you're able to create an intervention because it's digital, and that student who didn't master linear regressions can work on that. And this solves big problems in education, because you see students failing, let's say, an algebra or a calculus class at the end of the year, and they got to start all the way over and take that class over again. Well, that doesn't make sense. Maybe you're bad in linear progressions, maybe you're bad in factoring, but hey, maybe you're really good in polynomials, or maybe you're really good in derivatives. And you really just need to work on those first two areas. Being able to have technology in the classroom to be able to give immediate feedback, to understand how all the kids are learning every single lesson, every single day, and creating immediate interventions. That type of technology in the classroom would significantly help us be able to educate our population better, so that we're zooming in on the things where they need work and not just kind of giving them gross, broad information. And so I think that's one area where we need to improve. We need a lot more technology in the classroom. Smart classrooms is what I would call them. And then we also saw problems when I was running for mayor where one teacher would teach algebra and the student would pass, but they would fail the subject test. Another teacher would teach algebra and the students would pass, but then they would pass the subject test. And so you have students that are being taught that are passing the class, and one set of students who are passing the class but failing the test, one set of students who are passing the class and failing it. So the teachers teaching this were not the same. And so if you have the opportunity to bring best practices in, maybe you go online, you find someone who's teaching that lesson for the day. We can improve that if we had technology. We could get the best practices and the best teachers at all time. And then the last thing I would say is, just quickly, is we can learn from other countries. Germany has a really strong vocational program. When kids go into high school, you can pick one of two tracks. They have a dual education system, and one track is a vocational track. It's what we see that's in our, we have a lot of unions that have clerkships where you can, if you want to be a contractor, if you want to be a carpenter, if you want to be a glazer, you can go into these programs, but typically it's after high school, and then you can go into those programs that you can learn. I would advise we need more vocational learning in our high schools so that our students who are leaving and not going to college, because everyone's not going to go to college, they're not just getting thrown into the retail service field, making minimum wage. That's not a career, that's a job. That's just work. We want you to go somewhere where it's intelligent, where you would have vertical opportunity. And so I just think we need a lot more vocational programs so that students who aren't going to college can leave high school and be qualified, for employment in a career and not just services and work.
You've written about your mom planting the seed, as you say, for your success by being the first in the family to go to college. And you've also written and talked about a little earlier in the podcast about intelligent investments like the GI Bill. Talk about the role that higher education has played in your success and how important you think higher education can be in both alleviating poverty and increasing our nation's global competitiveness.
The one access point that 100% of Americans have is education. And that's an opportunity to mobilize out of poverty. I know that because my mom was the very first person in our family to go to college. And because she went, I've gone to college. And because I've gone, my daughter is going to go to college. My sister also has gone to college. So by sending one person in our family to college, generations of poverty were turned around. And so my mom was the pioneer for us to do that. And so I truly believe that education is the way up and the way out of poverty that all of us have access to. I'd also say, just in very practical terms, think about when we went through the Great Recession in 2008. Think of any recession, whether it was the bust in 2001, whether it was the savings and loans in the 1980s, or real estate in the 90s. We've seen these recessions, and typically people who have higher education are the last terminated through a recession. They're the first ones rehired if those jobs were taken away. And wages are typically higher and remain higher. But if you're middle class or lower middle class, you're typically the first ones terminated. And then when you start back, when the jobs come back, they're the last jobs that come back, and they typically come back at lower wages. And so I'm a true believer that higher education not only will give you the building blocks to move vertically up out of poverty, but it also, when we hit difficult stretches in our economy, you will be able to withstand, downward economic cycles. And the data shows that pretty convincingly.
Staying on the importance of competition, you've also written about striking the optimum balance between free markets and wealth creation, while remembering those who may be disrupted by innovation or are concerned about what change and innovation brings. In your view, how can we best strike that balance?
Yeah, and I think that, this is the difficult job of our elected officials. You have to always figure out where, because I'm a believer in less government involvement. But I do think that there are times when our economy is changing. We, referenced this a little bit earlier today when we talked about the Rust Belt. When the economy is changing and people are displaced, and they're in a place where, okay, I'm 50, 55 years old. I still need to work to make a living. I'm not at retirement age yet. The skill set that I learned, from 20 to 50 is no longer applicable because I was in a fossil fuel industry. And And now those people are stuck and they are frustrated. And I think they acted out in this last election cycle in 2016. And they made their voice known that we do not want to be ignored any longer. And by ignored, they're watching their jobs end up in Asia because of the lower regulatory policy, lower wage opportunities, and just the lack of American interest or their elected officials' interest in being able to keep them employed in the industry they were in. And so we owe it to them, I believe, to be able to help them learn how to fish again. How do we give them workforce training so they might be able to learn how to fish so they can go make the opportunities for themselves? So I think that as the economy is turning, we have to find that balance as we see people ascend to more and more wealth, new ideas that are coming out, businesses that are growing, and we create favorable tax policy and regulatory policy for businesses to continue to invest. I also think we have to look at, as this economy changes and some of the policies that we are at, and what the impact is on those who've been left behind as we move into a new economy. And then we still have to be able to work with them to be able to teach them how to fish so they can make a contribution in this economy through workforce retraining programs. And we've seen those programs. I don't have time to allude to all of them, but that being said, I think that's the right balance that we have to strike.
Damon, finally, we like to always end our PRI podcast with the same question. We love to enjoy a glass of wine here at PRI while discussing public policy, and wine's especially important to us given all the great wine produced in California. So please share with our listeners your recommendation for either your favorite wine or adult beverage or other drink of choice that they should try.
I'm going to use this opportunity to give a shout out to my good buddy Jeff Rusak. So Allison Wrigley, her name is Allison Wrigley Rusak now, and she's the heir to the Wrigley family. She's married to a guy named Jeff Rusak, and they actually have a vineyard up in Ballard Canyon. And I went up there, and they actually have a vineyard on Catalina Island as well. They own the island company there that manages the entire island. Her family used to own all that land, and they've given half that land over to the conservatory. But that being said, they have a vineyard there. They have a vineyard up in Ballard Canyon, and they make really good wine. They have a Pinot Noir that's just to die for. And I love my buddies that are doing entrepreneurial things, and I love to support them. But I'm a red wine guy at the end of the day, and so I hope I'm hitting the same preferences as some other people that are listening.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Damon.
No, thank you guys for having me. I look forward to participating again in the future, and hopefully we can, our discussion will help empower people and move the discussion forward on how we can have healthy policy to be able to improve free markets.
Thanks again to our guest, Damon Dunn, and to Tim Anaya. Check out Damon's blogs on Right by the Bay at pacificresearch.org. If you like this episode, please tell your friends and subscribe to PRI's podcast at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or TuneIn. And please do us a favor and give us 5 stars. You can also listen to our podcast on PRI's YouTube page, youtube.com/PacificResearch1. That's the number 1. Thanks for listening. I'm Rowena Itchon. We hope you'll come back again for another episode of PRI's podcast.